Hello everyone. So today I wanted to do Secret History of the World number 4. This one I'm going to be looking at the Sphinx actually. So a lot of people have looked at the Sphinx and they've said, oh yes, so they created the Great Pyramids of Egypt 4,000 years ago, or different people have different dates. And then sometime after that they created the Sphinx. The Sphinx isn't very sophisticated. It'd be quite easy to build, and I mean, nobody's really disputed that the ancient Egyptians had the power, had the tools, had the expertise to build the Sphinx. So nobody's disputing that, right? People dispute whether the ancient Egyptians, in the time frame that they were meant to have made them, created the pyramids, and they've also disputed whether the pyramids were tombs. But one thing that might be noted is that there are claims that the Sphinx is 800,000 years old. Now, 800,000 years ago, we weren't supposed to have the tools to create that, or did we? Maybe we did. Certainly that we did 4,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago. But we don't really know what tools we had 800,000 years ago. So I wanted to just look at that one as one of the hidden history bits. Well, could the Sphinx have been 800,000 years ago? 800,000 years old. So the first thing to note is that we don't really know what tools we had then, but probably given enough time we could have created something like that. But we also know that the ancient Egyptians didn't move there until 6,000 or 8,000 years ago, so it was basically uninhabited, but it could have been inhabited before that. So we don't need have aliens create the Sphinx. Could have been just created by humans. So why would they create the Sphinx? And one theory is that the Sphinx can be seen from space. Well, not with our equipment, but perhaps it's big enough that people, with some special microscope and all that, or telescope, that they could see it. Yeah, that seems reasonable. And that maybe that's a marker. So when people, or when creatures are coming closer to Earth, through maybe a wormhole or however they're travelling, they see a Sphinx and they say, okay, this is the kind of major dominant species. Like it's a combination of the dominant species, lion and all that sort of thing. There's also talk about the Sphinx in mythology being this, in fact they said there's 2 Sphinxes that were gateways and would kill you if you did the wrong thing and so forth. So the Sphinx, the idea of the Sphinx just being this statue that's next or near to the pyramids, we're sort of missing a lot of the mythology and a lot of the explanation for what it is. So if it was 800,000 years old, could it have survived that long? Well, in the desert things don't tend to fall apart very quickly, but the sand would swallow it up. So you'd expect that in that time the sands would swallow it up, but maybe like future civilizations that went through there unburied it, dug it up. Or maybe the sands buried it and then unburied it and buried it and unburied it. And another thing to note is that according to the Sumerians, who were of course based in Iraq, they didn't call themselves Sumerian. That was actually their word for the world, Sumer. Sumer meant the world. And so they were based around Iraq. It's not that far away from Egypt, but it's not the same place. But they say that their civilization started 500,000 years ago. Now we say it was about 8,000, but they say it was 500,000, and they've actually filled in the gaps as to what happened in that 500,000 year time period. And they said, they had kings that lived for 100,000 years and blah, 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 and all this sort of stuff. And they also say that they came from the skies, from the planet Nibiru, and that they were ruled by Anunnaki, who some people have confused this. They think that Anunnaki were gods. They were not. Anunnaki were gods on Earth, which we can roughly translate as angels, or something a little bit below gods, because in the heavens they had the true gods, who were pretty much dragons, but much bigger than our dragons, because they were what we might call world dragons, and they were as big as the Earth itself. So they say that happened 500,000 years ago. So if the Sphinx existed before that, 300,000 years before, could the Sphinx have lured people down? Now we also have to note, by the way, the oldest date for the age of the pyramids of Giza is 104,000 years old. So the Sphinx is said to be much older than the older state of the pyramids. Now, of course, we all dispute different things, and some people do say the pyramids are older, but that's if they're saying, oh, the pyramids are 4,500 years, the Sphinx is only 4,000. But you can't carbon date rock. So they're looking at different other things about how they design things. There's no evidence of them ever building those pyramids. But they did build other pyramids. Didn't do a very good job of it. And there's also no evidence of them making them as a tomb or in honour of pharaohs or anything like that. They decorated them. No doubt that the ancient Egyptians decorated them and maybe even put a hall of records underneath the Sphinx, but of course that no longer exists, and maybe it never existed. There's also a tomb underneath the Sphinx, or supposedly. We don't know what that is. Nobody's been there. Nobody's actually been to see it, but they've sort of visualised it with their equipment. So yeah, could the Sphinx have been built? So one thing is, so the first humans were 2.5 million years ago. And the first pre-human or human ancestors were between 4 and 8 million years ago. And I've said before, they could have been as much as 10. The fossil record is never completely complete. So they're pre-human ancestors, what we call hominids. But they developed into humans 2.5 million years ago. So I want to say that, so that was the first time that we were not apes, we were not chimpanzees, we were not anything else. We were what would become humans. Anywhere from 4 to 8 million years ago. So anything from that becomes humans. It doesn't become anything else. It doesn't become an ape, doesn't become a chimpanzee, doesn't become any other kind of monkey or anything like that. So they only became humans. So that was when we split off. Right, so it's a bit of an important time. So I think it's quite reasonable to refer to them as humans, even if they don't look like humans. Humans as a unique species. Now, scientifically, they say hominids, but yeah. But even still, humans, 2.5 million. So humans were around for a long time, 2/3 of their existence, before the earliest date for the Sphinx. Could we have developed in 1.7 million years? Could we have developed enough as humans to be able to build a Sphinx? We certainly have enough time to build it. Yeah, and things survive for a long time in the desert. It's not particularly sophisticated or hard to build. So yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what tools they had, but no matter what tools they had, they would have been able to build it. No problems. So would they have built it with an aim to sort of attract beings from the sky to come down? Whether they thought of those beings as gods or aliens, they most likely thought of them as gods. Could that have been a way to say to the gods, they would have called them, in the sky, and said, hey, these are the powerful creatures on Earth. Look at this, come down and visit us. And they could easily. They would never have gone up to the sky, so they wouldn't know what you can necessarily see. And I mean, you might have to have a telescope or something to be able to see it, but it certainly seems quite feasible. Do we know that for absolutely certain? No, we don't. The Sphinx it's a controversial building, and we don't really have established this is when it was made, because we've got no evidence of it being built. Similar to the pyramids of Giza, in fact even the smaller pyramids, we don't have any evidence of being built, or of people building them, or talking about building them, or how they built them, or anything like that. And we also don't have that at the Sphinx. There's no doubt that people 6,000 years ago could easily have built something as small as the Sphinx. It's certainly within what we can make. And in fact, they have other Sphinxes around the world as well. Well, they had them in Iraq until ISIS, I think it was, that destroyed them. But they were smaller Sphinxes. And they usually were in twos, which is interesting, because mythologically the Sphinx was two of them. Not just one, but there's only one we can see. Is the second one buried? We're not really allowed to look. But there is a theory that there is a second Sphinx there, and that they're guarding something, because Sphinxes were guardians. So there were two of them. And between the two would be whatever they were guarding. So then you think, oh, well, okay, they were the guardians of the pyramids. But pyramids are quite a distance away. You wouldn't have sphinxes that far away if they were guarding them. And again, there's a lot of claims that the sphinxes are older than the pyramids, so they were guarding something else. Now maybe whatever they were guarding has been destroyed or taken or whatever. But, you know, that would be the theory, because they were meant to be guardians, like an older version of gargoyles or dragons, or well, depending on your view of dragons. But you know, that's what they were there. They were meant to be guardians. And yeah, so we're talking about the Sphinx. Well, there may well have been two. Maybe the second one was destroyed. Maybe it's buried somewhere and we just don't know where it is. And maybe, and I mean, if you did find the second one, then you'd think, okay, go between the two, go forward a bit, or past, whatever, because they'd be facing you to stop you from going past them. So behind them would be where whatever they were guarding was. And is that the pyramids? I mean, if the pyramids are newer than the Sphinx, or the Sphinxes, there should be two, then there couldn't be what they're guarding. Have to be something else that they're guarding. Something that we haven't found yet. So that is quite an interesting thing, but look, it is quite feasible, I think, that it could be that old. We're not talking about something particularly complicated. We could easily build them today. We could easily build a Sphinx using modern equipment. We can't build the pyramids of Giza using modern equipment. Sorry. In fact, they renovated the Sphinx. They made it bigger. When they tried to destroy one of the pyramids, we couldn't fix it, not with modern equipment. Just not capable of fixing it. They couldn't destroy it properly either. Just damage it a bit. So, yeah, while we can talk about the pyramids being able to survive cataclysm, that Sphinx probably couldn't. Well, not as well. Which could explain why the nose is chopped off. I don't think that was an artistic choice. That was just something that happened because of perhaps some big cataclysm, which suggests it's at least as old as the last cataclysm, which is 11,400 years ago. So, if you're talking about the Sphinx, you've got to say it's got to be at least that old. But then 800,000 years is a lot older than that. Like it's 50, 60 times older. 70 times older. So, why does it need to be that old? It doesn't need to be, but that's just what they say. So, if it is that old, and there would have to have been a second one according to legend, and then there's something that they're guarding, and nobody's even suggested what it is they're guarding. Maybe it was something so amazing that it's been taken, or that it's hidden, or that we haven't found it yet. Or maybe we have found it and they just haven't told us that they found it because they don't want us to know. Maybe somebody else is using it. I mean, you know, let's just imagine that they're hiding a Stargate, for example. I mean, you know, from Stargate belief, or something similar to that. Maybe that's hidden in front or behind the Sphinxes, because there should be two, and buried. And maybe people were using it now, and that's why you're not getting told about it. I mean, you've got to think that we're not really being told very much about the Sphinx. Should be being told more about it. It's actually more mysterious than the pyramids, and that suggests it's older. So if the pyramids are 104,000 years old, now there is you can go from 52 to 104, and that's a mathematical thing. 52,000 is because of the mathematical precision. It has to be at least 52,000 years old, and up to 104,000. It wouldn't need to be much more than 104. There'd be no reason. It could be older, but there's no reason for it. Yeah, so if you got that, yeah. Why are the pyramids there? Well, perhaps that was in honour of there's a Stargate. Maybe there's a Stargate or something equally amazing, or was there. Maybe it's been destroyed, maybe it's been taken. But, you know, that is something that is an interesting concept, that maybe they made something, maybe it was non-functional. This is the thing. They've had portals for over 1 million years. So I talked about the fairies in the first religion. That's 2.3 million years old. They used to make portals. They believed there was a portal to the other world. They called it the other world. That's where the fairies lived. And they used to build these things called cairns, and they'd have holes in them. People couldn't go through the holes. It was believed that when you died, you could go through the hole and live with the fairies for the rest of your existence, as you know, when you're dead. So they had portals. So perhaps eventually they worked out how to make a portal 800,000 years ago. And perhaps the Sphinx was with the old religion, the religion of the fairies or nature worship. And that was meant to be guarding a portal. Whether the portal actually did anything is another question. But yeah, maybe that's what it was. Anyway, that's all from me. Bye bye now.